Well, looking at the first round, which is always exciting, I'm kind of breaking this up because I'm going to be taking breaks in between, but the first two players to go were the English, who just basically continued with their siege and moved around dealing with unrest, and the Turks, who are shifting their forces over. They've had a discussion with Russia about the possibility, if Russia's still in a war with Poland, that Turkey will come in on their side. Otherwise, they're kind of looking at an attack on Venice. Either one is useful to them. Poland looks easier if they're engaged with Russia. If that can't be done, well, the painful bite of having to try to take these islands out in a naval campaign comes to mind. It's not pleasing, but there aren't really many other options for Turkey at this point, except maybe to start a war with Persia and try to gain territories off them. But in terms of value for their buck, in terms of pure value, the Venetians are what they want to take out. In terms of, and then they can go after the knights afterwards. In terms of maybe being able to get an advantage that is kind of a surprise situation. Well, if Poland is tied down and not able, has its forces being decimated by Russians, well, then that's kind of an open door for the Turks, and the Russians certainly don't mind it, getting some help against the Poles. One of the few ways you can handle these big miners is to have a couple major powers collude against them. Then we come to the French, and the French had a big turn. Some debate, hey, do I want to spend $100? Nah, because I needed to protect Milan. So I shifted up to Hainaut, over to Milan. Luxembourg attacked Naples and was repulsed, but he's got it down to just a few strength points of cav that the Spaniards have there. They have really no defense down there. The French were planning on besieging Naples, so they moved their fleet into place to do so. That's not going to happen. Elsewhere, you can see down here, they're setting off, exploring through Texas. They're making their way towards Spanish territory because my understanding, now I may be mistaken and I'll check this out, but my understanding of how the peace works in the Spanish Succession War is you can't take things from their allies. So French aren't going to be able to get an advantage off the Dutch or off the Habsburgs. They're going to have to take things from Spain itself. And given that, well, they want to capture Spanish stuff. They can always look for that war with the Dutch later. But they really kind of wanted this war. In some sense, you could say, well, why didn't they just let the Habsburgs, stay? They have less at stake here than the Dutch do. But the big reason for this is the Prince of Condé and Turenne, bringing Turenne and Condé in at once. Wow, this is, the time where you want the French to attack. The French also have some proxies going on. So James II attacked and drove Cromwell out of his siege of Lincoln. However, he's also down to just, I think, one strength point of cav there. And for the Russians, well, the Poles hit them. They were unable to reinforce, but the Poles actually got defeated because they had too much militia in their army, too many raw recruits, and they got driven back. They're also opening up a siege here. I've got the rest of the round to play out, but I need to get away. Alright, so now here we are in the final portion of that first round. Spaniards have been moving forward, kind of trying to conglomerate. They've got this army and these detachments. They're moving them together. It's hard to move quickly without rivers in the New World areas and without boats or whatever. So they don't want to take their attrition, but they want to make sure that they can handle the French force that is moving through Texas, also rather slowly, if need be. Elsewhere, not a lot actually. French probably wanted to move this somewhere. I think they succeeded in getting, well, it doesn't really make a difference. They may want to shift it here for another sea attempt on Kamchatka. Not much happening in Asia. The Dutch have not yet gotten an army down to Van Diemen. They were considering using that to attack the French possessions over here in in the Indonesia area. What else? Well, we're going to be getting good old Cromwell back. He's got to take command of the larger army over here in Ireland, which means that the force in England is going to be commanded by this mercenary who's not terribly good. That's something, well, maybe Cromwell can fix the problem here in Connaught, and once the Irish revolt is done, then a full concentration of those three armies can be brought to bear. Right now, the Royalists have the leadership advantage over this mercenary, but they don't have any troops to really face him. So it's probably okay to not have Cromwell over there. Down here we're seeing a lot going on in the Mediterranean. French fleet came out, remember, to try to blockade Naples. Well, the Genoese slipped by and ended up over here with a huge Spanish galley fleet from back in the first turn of the game. They had this. It's going to provide some potential to do damage to the French fleet. They're probably going to lose the battle, but there's a backup Spanish fleet here. Trump's got quite a bit of a fleet here, which is taking out the French privateers. And this is kind of the problem. The privateers facing the French, well, there's some Spaniards here that the French could go deal with. Of course, then they'd have to deal with the Venetian fleet, which it could have galleasses. I don't think it actually does, but I might have to change that. But they can't deal with the Dutch fleet here, privateering on their main merchant fleet, without dealing with a couple other fleets that could be significantly powerful. Now, they'd rather face the Spanish and Genoese than facing the Dutch, and the French have a technological advantage over just about everyone except the Genoese in terms of naval combat. Yeah, so, well, the Venetians also have the higher technology. Let's see what else happened. The Russians ended up taking Kazan, which means they're now freed up to maybe push forward. They're going to have to fight the Poles to get more. They'd like to take more, but that could be kind of risky. They're also pushing forward with their exploration, getting towards the Manchurian border. Montecucculi came down and faced Turin here. Now, Montecucculi managed to lose almost his entire army facing Turin. Turin's a better leader. Not by a lot in the fire phase, but in the melee phase, his big 6 combat rating, which increases his chance of dying, is an issue. The Spaniards laid siege down here to what? Papagnan? And the Dutch laid siege to Nord, which is an attempt to draw Condé off. And there's also, although things are going to have to change to make sure Montecocculi's in charge of the right force here, but there's also a Habsburg force heading into Alsace. So the French are really, really under siege with so many enemies, each of which can penetrate them once in each round for the same kind of cost that France can do to one country. Now, France has enough cash lying on hand to do at least one major campaign if they feel the need. That's a big choice, though. But they may want to, because they may want Luxembourg down here in Naples to siege that. They may want to start taking more of the Italian possessions. Turin's probably fine where he is, but Condé, well, we were kind of hoping he'd be able to intercept, and he wasn't. Alright, a lot of talking there, but that kind of shakes out the beginning, this first round, what happened. Hopefully the other rounds will be a little shorter. Okay, let's focus in on this main war. Again, I'm breaking the round into a couple of sections because the Spanish have pushed in. You see they're sieging more territories. Turin pulled over here to challenge the Spanish, but he can't quite make it in. Got the French pushing here. Actually, I don't know if I have to. They're the final one, yeah. Okay, so we're done. Reuter made it back with the Gold Fleet, and now he's taking command of the Spanish fleet. He can do that because there are no Dutch fleets that he has to command at higher precedence. Here, Hanover came marching in, drew Conde off. Conde managed to get an interception down here at Arras. Hanover's pushed back into the Netherlands, and you can see the spaces aren't big enough in this area of the board. When the battles start happening here, it just gets crowded. But because Conde was drawn off, Siegen could come down, and he besieged Brussels. Now, Conde defeated the Hanoverian army. Oops. That guy's in Flanders. This one had to retreat back. He could actually have retreated to Flanders as well. So they're together. Between them, they can reinforce the other Dutch leader. Dutch fleet finished off those privateers. Russians kind of danced around the Poles after beating them back from Kazan. Now they're trying to handle this siege here and break that before anything gets worse. One of the big problems that the alliance has is these Venetians can't come any further than this. By the way, I looked into the galleasses, and they're only effective against galleys, and I'm assuming there are no French galleys, and there aren't. So it's better to have real warships in place, just in case, because they only have any real special. They're just galleys otherwise, basically. But yeah, we've got a... and Montecuculi's gone up here and laid siege to Alsace. I mean, we've just got invasions happening everywhere, and the French have to stem these with their superior leaders and more troops. They have larger armies than anyone else. Their counters are worth more. They've got like 40 infantry. Nothing else has that many. The Habsburgs are down to like 25. They're just considered very weak at this point. Anyway, we got to see if the round ends. That would kind of spoil things. Nope. Okay, so for the first things, Cromwell cleared up his problem in Ireland, and we got a siege going on there. Poles ended up sieging Kazan. Turks stopped moving. They're done with their actions. The Spanish have to figure out how to get their fleet, their Smyrna fleet, that's attributed to them home. They've been not doing that, and well, maybe this turn Tromp can come around and try to get rid of the French fleet in the Med. Again, though, I'm at the halfway point. The French, Turin's doing something kind of like a Freddy the Great type maneuver. After having beaten the Habsburgs here, he marched down, drove off the Spaniards. Not a victory. The siege of Naples is finished as well. But it's tough. Only being able to hit one territory per turn, while his opponents are hitting, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 with Hanover, 5, I mean, they have so many different entry points into the French territory that it's really tough to drive them all back. And even if the French manage to defeat all the armies, they're still not gaining land that way. So that's one of the reasons they have to kind of advance here, but they can't just keep pushing because they have to defend the French homeland too much. That $100 cost, they can only do one of them with the cash they have on hand. Ooh, I gotta check this guy. He's gotta try to make his way home. He failed to discover Kamchatka. Anyway, that's sort of the French side of things at this point. Actually, something I forgot to take care of during the French turn, they marched into San Diego here. Yeah, I know it's not really, but that's what I've got there. And ended up defeating the colonists there. They haven't taken the missionary away, or mission away, but they did capture the colony, but that's as far as they can go. They lost their conquistador there. And they can still push forward. They know all this territory, but it's kind of hard. They may do it. Just because they have better troops, they have veteran troops. They're going to face a real problem, though, when they face that Spanish army, which is much larger than they are. And at the end of the third round, very, very bad things happened for the French. In terms of sieges, they lost Nord. The Spanish army combined here, as it did in the colonies way down here. Habsburgs continuing their siege. But the big lost, Trump came down into the Mediterranean. Now, he's a better leader than Duquesne, but I thought maybe the technological edge that gives a +1 because of the distance between them here to the French. It also gave them better tables. And Duquesne's not that bad, but Trump actually defeated the French Navy. Major defeat. Pursuit. Took out 10 ships in pursuit, which means 5 of those ships converted to Dutch. And the Dutch have really won things, and won the naval battle there. And that's evened things out. The French gains have been neutralized by the Dutch gain and the Dutch naval battle, which is, pretty impressive. And here's the thing, this war can't end in a white peace. It must end with a victor. In fact, if they're tied, a peace is impossible. I think it's possible for there to be separate peaces. I think the French and the Dutch, for example, could agree to a peace, but the 2 main contestants here, France and Spain, can't. All they can do is agree to, yes, one of us won and one of us lost. That feel to the battle, that particular restriction makes it a hard war to end, because you can't really come to some sort of, it's not that bad. No matter what the loss, it's going to be that bad. It's like 2 provinces swinging from one side to the other. And if the Dutch manage to stay in this for the whole war, which they probably will, they have been promised by Spain, not that Spain has to abide by that, but they probably will, to get those 2 provinces if they've captured 2 things. And they've already taken one. They've taken Nord. If they can defeat Condé up here, they've pretty much got free reign. And likewise, they could take something like Alsace, but that doesn't really help anyone. Stealing that from France isn't to anyone's great advantage. So France might be willing to cut a deal of, oh, okay, I'll give my trading post, or I'll give a colony or whatever, rather than losing a province. And they could probably get away fairly cheap that way. Elsewhere, though, well, if the French win, they can only take provinces from Spain unless they come to some sort of separate peace with the Dutch, which, obviously, if the Dutch are losing the war, they don't want to make, they want to stay in it, but they may not have the chance. With stabilities as high as they are, though, this is going to be a long-lasting war, and there's the possibility of the English coming in at some point in some form, possibly as a separate individual war against the French. They have their own axe to grind. They're interested in Calais, but they're also interested in the New World possessions that they'd like to take. Okay, well, this was the 4th and final round. We had a roll that ended things. Let me briefly try to explain what happened. The French came down. At least in the important stuff, the French came down and drove the Spaniards off. The Spaniards didn't return. They only spent $10 for their action, not because they're short on money, but because they don't want to face Turin again. Russians positioned themselves against the Poles, but that doesn't really relate to anything because Kazan's not going to fall. So the Russians may have a chance to regain it in the peace phase. English, James attacked the English leader here, who's still there in case he has to withdraw or something. But otherwise, the English also pushed their fleet under Blake to try to pull Cromwell over, but they don't have enough ships to haul him anymore. They lost a lot of their transport ships, so they're kind of in a tricky position there. French, well, we already saw what Turin did. So the Dutch advanced forward into Calais, and Reuter sailed out here. His plan was to pick these guys up and set out, but he wanted to blockade Calais first, get a jump on that, and he got a plus marker, which means that remains. But Siegen has not succeeded in besieging Hainaut, so he has to pull out of there. Montecuculi took Alsace, which means he can push forward into, say, Franche-Comté, for example. Or he could cut through Lorraine because it's the Emperor, the imperial forces, and move into, some perhaps richer areas there that are easier to get than the Franche-Comté. Anyway, things are looking bad for the French. They may be the wealthiest. They may have a lot of power, but losing that naval battle was huge. Finish up the round and come back with the post-mortem, as it were. Damn it, I remembered things right. Major battles, it's covered over in the military section because they handle victory points there. They don't cover the stability issue, and that's sitting here. Just some additions to the military phases. I didn't notice this, but yes, there's a stability switch. I'm not going to put it into play this turn, but from now on I'm going to play with it because, well, it really should be there. It's one of the major factors that can shift a war, is not only do you get the point off of the major battle, which I've been factoring in because I've been giving 2 points, I think, for major battles, which may not be what you're supposed to do. Nope, major battles are also 2 points. So it gives you 2 points towards the peace level, but it also gives you a stability point, which is another point towards peace, or 2 points towards peace for minors. Anyway, pity I didn't notice that from the beginning. I remembered it, I couldn't find it. Well, that kind of wraps things up. We have the entering 1670, that's the 37th turn. That's going to be a Holy Roman Emperor election. That also opens up the War of Movement, which is sort of, well, it's basically the Wars of Louis XIV, which is what we're beginning to get into here. Unfortunately, everybody's land technology is way behind their naval, and they're nowhere near that. It's usually tough to hit all these on target. There's of course the possibility that some leader, some event will trigger a jump ahead like Cromwell would have. I don't think there's anything for this one. I know the Warren Lace Frederick usually triggers that. What do we got? Well, yeah, the Russians came to peace with the Turks, or with the Poles. And that's kind of big for a couple of reasons. One, they got the territory. Two, they got a decent amount of victory points. They ended up high in the positive range. And that's kind of interesting. The English, for example, pulled in 20-something victory points. And they haven't done anything, right? I mean, that's just England being England at this point in the game. They're going to crank victory points. The Russians also pulled that many because of their victory over the Poles. Even though it's only a level 1, they had some good military victories. But France, with their big naval defeat, ended up breaking about even, you know. So France has a hard time generating victory points compared to England in this era of the game. In fact, everybody does. The Dutch are the only ones with anywhere near that amount. The Turks are reconsidering. First of all, there's no way they're going to go to war with Poland. Among other things, one of the reasons it's good for Russia is Sobieski, who's a pretty decent, at least on the shock value, king for Poland. Hey, actually, the king for Poland is almost that good anyway, but, you know, it gives you a named leader who's pretty decent, has shown up. We also have, for the Habsburgs, Ferdinand showed up, and that's kind of a downgrade from Montecucculi. Montecucculi will probably get some forces. The question is which, you know, whether or not I can get this stack up to the strength of this stack so I can transfer the better leader onto the French border and keep Ferdinand down on the Italian side where there doesn't appear to be a real problem. Turks lost their A-rated leader other than the Grand Vizier, but they got a new one, Kuprulu, who's their minister, but is not tied to the event. He's just considered a regular military leader for this. Guess we can peek at the points. They don't tell us much. England broke 500. France actually dropped down to 707. Dutch holding pretty steady. The Russians, you know, if the Russians can turn this around, the fact that they didn't start out with a lot of stuff means that there's a lot of stuff they can gain and get victory points off of. So that's always been kind of my hope. Maybe the Risto events will change the way that all works out. Any new leaders, Max Emanuel over here in Bavaria. But not a lot for the most part. Oh! The big Trump went away. But we got Bankert up here for the Dutch. We also got a littler Trump, which will help them out a lot. All right, I'm going to load this one up. Went way too long on this turn, but it was a big turn.